Now, speaking of sacrifice, Don, I think you said you also had a story about Canada, which is to talk about sacrifice.
Yeah, and I mean, Canada's, I think, really relevant to the U.S. because it's sort of on energy issues, they're typically a few years ahead of us in terms of anti-energy regulations. And so they're in an interesting situation right now because, I mean, they have unimaginable oil reserves, but the industry is actually suffering, and to the point where it's been forced to sell its product for as little as 20% of the global price. And the major reason why is because they're able to produce.
So just to be clear, this means they're selling oil at 80% off. Like,
right.
That's crazy. And this is the most valued commodity in the world. And so they're getting paid 20 cents on the dollar, and their oil is, relatively speaking, expensive to produce because it involves a lot of advanced technology to get oil from what are called oil sands or tar sands. So anyway, keep going.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you'd wonder, well, like, how could that be? Why in the world would they be selling it so cheap? And the major reason is that they are not able to transport it. They're not able to get it to the international markets where it's the main way they sell it. And that's predominantly because there's been major barriers to one thing to stress is the three major pipelines: Trans Mountain Line, a thing called Line 3 replacement, and then Keystone XL. And I mean, a majority of Canadians and close to 90% of Albertans, which is the province where most of the oil industry exists in Canada, they support the pipelines, but these pipelines have been opposed by a very vocal and, I mean, frankly, often unlawful minority who will just stop interfere with projects that have been approved by government. And I mean, one thing that I find striking about this whole situation is that I think it's tempting to hear like totally suicidal policies like the Green New Deal and think of them as almost impossible. Like, people are not going to pass policies that are that destructive. And I think that's true in the case where like Stefan was talking about before, where the suicide is very clear, right? A carbon tax means I'm going to be paying a greater tax for energy, and I don't want to do that. But when it's less obvious, when it's just, oh, we're stopping this particular pipeline, you can get policies that can basically eviscerate a vital industry. Or if you look at other places in Europe, they don't even let these industries like fracking get off the ground. And so I think one lesson from this that's not particularly helpful to Canadians at this point, but at least for the US, is that when we hear policies that can seem almost outlandish, like the Green New Deal, which is, oh, we're just going to be 100% renewable in 15 years. I think you have to take them seriously and treat them seriously, because it is possible to go down a path that involves massive energy destruction or denial.
One thing I'm really interested in and haven't fully worked out, not even close, unfortunately, is just what can be done to help the Canadian debate, because I'm not Canadian, but it's a nearby country. I know a lot of good people there. And whenever I go, they rightly complain about how much of their country is being destroyed by these green forces. And there just needs to be a different kind of strategy. And whatever else that strategy consists of, I definitely believe it needs to involve what I call arguing to 100, which means that the pro-energy side should be arguing that the pro-energy policies that are being stopped are a means to doing good things. They're a means to promoting Canadian progress, promoting Canadian flourishing, including having a good environment, and that the people who are opposing these policies are dramatically hurting Canadians, and that they're not idealists. They're very destructive because they're willing to sacrifice the well-being of Canadians and for that matter, people around the world who could benefit from Canadian resources in the name of in the name of a whole bunch of things, but which ultimately do not hold water. So Canadian.
Well,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I mean, there's another angle I think is relevant here too, which is just the sheer injustice towards the industry. I mean, the Canadian oil industry is vital to that country and has done a lot for that country. And even if you just think about it in terms of taxes paid to support the government, and yet you have these provinces that benefit from Alberta and then treat them as if like they're villains. And so it's demanding stuff because of their virtue that they're able to provide because of their virtue of supplying the country and the world with energy. And then that, oh, we're just going to control you and restrict you, and we're not going to care if you can't actually function. Like that, it is the, they're ignoring the damage that they're doing to Canada, but particularly treating these people who are in effect the saviors of the country as villains. I think that has to be exposed as well.
Yeah, and they should stand up with moral confidence.